Live. Hello and good evening. Welcome to yet another edition of the Multimillionaire Forum in its online avatar. We've been doing this for a while, as you know, and now we have no choice but to bring this thing to you on an online basis instead of the face-to-face meeting that we were having in the past. For those who are joining this forum for the very first time, let me tell you a little bit about this Multimillionaire Forum. This idea was conceived for people, investors, community at large to come together and talk about and explore and discuss ideas of investment opportunities. So this is not any investment advice. This is a purely educative sort of a forum where we are putting forth an idea which is up for discussion. And every time for an idea, we have an expert who comes onto our show and talks to us about it. Because, you know, we all know, right, that we want to make great wealth and we all are in the journey to make millions and billions over a period of time. And if life could have it, if we could have our way, and if life could allow us to do that, we all want to make great wealth at absolutely no risk or at, let's say, zero risk. But, you know, the reality is not as clear as it seems. The reality is quite different. So in order to make great money, if we have to make 40%, we also have to have the stomach to the appetite and the stomach to, you know, digest a 20, 25%, 30% erosion also on our money at some point of time. But having said that, to make great wealth, we obviously need to have great ideas. Now, coming to the session that we are going to talk about today over the next 30, 40 odd minutes or so. See, think about it on your everyday life. Even in the current circumstances, when we are in a semi-unlocked kind of a state, whenever we want to go from one place to the other, we don't even think about it, right? It's just very, very obvious. Either we will just take out our own cars or our own, you know, two-wheelers and we'll just go from one place to the other. But think about it. There was a time, and this time was the early 1900s, where there's this very famous picture of the New York Times Square. And in that New York Times Square picture, what was shown is that at that particular time of that era, the entire road was full of horse carriages because that was the mode of transportation. And what we could see in that picture was that there is only one single car in that. And you know, the car makers thought that the future was not as bright as they imagined. And people's mindset was that, look, I mean, how can a machine actually replace horses? And exactly 10 years down the line, the very same Times Square in New York, they had another picture which was shot. And that picture actually showed that the entire road was full of motorized vehicles, basically cars. And there was not a single horse carriage to be seen. And this happened in a matter of just about 10 years. Now, why is this very popular? Let me also build the context on that. This particular story and this picture of Times Square has got very famous and very popular because for the last about almost a decade or so, a lot of people have been talking about things in the area, in the space of climate change. We've been talking about, you know, reducing carbon emissions. India is also a part of the COP21 that happened in Paris a few years ago, and where we've also signed a pact along with many nations of the world, saying that we will also gradually reduce our carbon footprint. And what that essentially means in simple English is that we have to release, or we have to reduce the amount of carbon that is released in the atmosphere, because otherwise it is having adverse impact on our climate. Look at it today. Today we are on 15th of October, and this particular monsoons of 2020, we started somewhere in the middle of May. We are now in the middle of October. We've had more rains than ever. And as we are speaking, we have a cyclone which is basically making its path across the from the Bay of Bengal across the subcontinent of India and moving towards the Arabian Sea. And there are warnings which are coming, orange alert and, you know, the green alerts and yellow alerts that are being flashed all across. Hyderabad, we already saw what happened in the news. So the point is that we are talking about, you know, the future being electric vehicles and those kind of zero carbon emission vehicles. And there is some sort of prophecy in that space, which is to say that motorized and vehicles that are dependent on fossil fuel, which is essentially petrol and diesel, will also start getting phased out in a matter of time. Now, having said that, think about the situation that we are in today. We thought a few months ago that, you know, there was no public transport. The world was under a lockdown kind of a situation. And the only way to commute was through your own vehicles, whether a two-wheeler or a four-wheeler. So I was thinking to myself, and I was talking to my friends, family, clients, investors, and we were talking about the fact that there's so much of opportunity which will come in this space, because obviously the need for personal mobility and personal transportation will hit the roof. So whoever can afford a car will buy a car, whoever can afford a two-wheeler will buy a two-wheeler, and a cycle, as the case might be. But there will be enormous amount of demand for personal transportation, and which is why we have our guest here today. Today, our guest is Sachin Trivedi. Sachin has been a fund manager with the UTI Mutual Fund for almost a decade now. He manages half a dozen other mutual funds. But this is a very unique and a very interesting idea which we are going to explore, which is transportation and logistics. They have a special fund for that, transportation and logistics fund. This fund's been around for quite some time, and you'll be quite surprised to know that over 16 years, this fund has done a 14% plus kind of rate of return. And last 6 months, it actually did 40% plus. But last 6 months is an anomaly, right? We all know that. Across the board, virtually every investment, whether it's a direct stock that you've got or whether it's a mutual fund that you had, everything's gone up by about 30 or 40%, because we fell. There was a severe crash that happened in the month of March of 2020. And then by the time it was about August or so, pretty much everything got recovered and we had a V-shaped recovery that we saw. So the point here is that there is this key opportunity in our lives. I do not think personally that transportation is going away anywhere. And I think this opportunity is going to be intact for the next 10 or maybe 20 or maybe even 30 years, despite the fact that we need to be in a zero carbon environment. So, Sachin, with that, I want to welcome you. Please do unmute yourself, and my request to you is that if you could open the conversation with the fact that if you can tell us that my hypothesis that this is going to be an opportunity for the next 2 or 3 decades, is that well found, and do you also sort of corroborate with my view and whatever your research and analysis also shows about transportation as a sector? So welcome on board, Sachin. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Sachin Trivedi. And Sachin, floor is yours.
Thank you, Kartik. Wonderful. You laid down three underlying principles here, or the foundations that you spoke about. 3 points, where one is the wealth, second is the need for mobility, and third, if I rightly recollect, you're also talking about the carbon footprint, right? And all these three things are quite very much associated with the sector that we're going to talk about, right? The moment when somebody becomes wealthy, maybe the two most important thing in his mind is, one, to buy an expensive house, second, to own expensive vehicles, right? So obviously there is always a desire, need. Obviously the first need starts with so I used to give this example long back, stop giving it because otherwise people may not like it, but it's very much reality. You just go back, think about what used to happen 15 years back, right? 15 years back, an Iron Man used to come on a cycle, right? And as he started, so you've seen that maybe 7, 8, 9 years back, he started shifting himself to a moped, and today he would be coming on a scooty. It's just a simple explanation that not just that he's looking for a solution to mobilize, he's also looking for convenience, right? So that's exactly the entire thing about. And the third is important thing before we go into detail about each of these subjects is the carbon footprint. Again, you would observe in the market that there is a talk of ESG, multiple stocks, right, from some of the dominant FMCG stocks to some of the alcoholic stocks to some of the carbon related, I mean to say the power stocks or the coal stocks, everything is hampered. But despite that, this industry, so if you recollect 20 years back, there was a lot of talks about vehicles emitting a lot of carbon. Still, this industry adopted and has kept giving solution to the nation, not just India, but across the. So for the human being, this industry has been giving a lot of services by continuously giving solutions. So the underlying thing I'm here trying to talk about is that this industry is quick to adapt, and quick to provide solution to the underlying need of the human being. And just to connect back, and which is where I'm quite confident about the fact or the question which the Karthik raised, that is this an opportunity for next 20-30 years? I certainly feel yes, especially in a country like India. Just to give you some background about this industry in India, so when we talk about growth industry, growth opportunity, we obviously need to know how many people own vehicle in a vehicle, or what is the level of consumption in that country, right? So when we talk about this consumption in our country, the penetration level for two-wheeler industry is just 13%. Despite whatever we see, the fact hardcore number is a 13% penetration. That's the reality. If you see where this number potentially could be in some of the most penetrated or in some of the denser areas where we draw these observations, where we may generalize things that no, India is done, dusted. But even in a city like Delhi, city like Pune, the penetration level would be as high as somewhere between 25 to 30%. So that's where the country has to eventually reach. Even those cities will keep growing, but I'm saying that on top of that, the rest of the country has to keep so much space. Now, this is about the two-wheeler mobility. Let's talk about the passenger vehicle. Within the passenger vehicle, our penetration is just under 3%. So that's significantly lower when we compare to some of the developed countries, which could be as high as 50%, or in some of the developing countries, again, this number is much higher, right? But obviously, what has been observed is that it's not that we're going to jump in, let's say, a year or a two kind of a situation. What generally is observed across the world is that when a particular country crosses certain threshold of per capita GDP is when the big shift happens from the two-wheeler to the four-wheeler. So obviously, if you ask me the longer-term growth potential, keeping this in mind, for passenger vehicle will be much higher compared to two-wheeler. Obviously, but even I'm saying that the two-wheeler itself is changing, and within this piece again, one clear observation across industry, not just two-wheeler, but even in four-wheeler, is the continuous need to upgrade, right? So no longer people are satisfied with a moped. They are also not satisfied with the Splendor, although it may be the biggest selling brand. But in back of the mind, people have somewhere that they either want to upgrade themselves to the Pulsar, Avenger, or to the Royal Enfield, or maybe a bigger bikes, right? So that's one underlying feature, two-wheelers. Similarly, if you draw the same parallel to the four-wheeler industry, no longer people just want or satisfied with the Alto. Maybe 10 year back, they've shifted to Swift, now to Baleno, or the crossovers that we see in the market. And continuously, there is a feature upgrade which keeps happening. So that way, the industry keeps expanding, and which is the big opportunity, not just for the auto OEM. It is also a multi-year opportunity for the auto ancillaries where we invest in. Because these also auto ancillaries, because the way they have adapted, got the technology, not only they are serving the domestic market, now they have started serving the international market also. So there is clearly a long way for our industry to go. Right?
Fabulous. Thank you so much. So,
Yeah.
friends, there's just two or three things, actually, two things which are coming out extremely crystal clear from what Sachin has just said. So, one is when he spoke about the industry, the auto industry has this reputation of being extremely adaptive. So what that basically means is if there is a need for, let's say, from a 100cc to a 200cc kind of a vehicle, then the industry will adapt and provide it, or maybe a 400cc. Now, if there is a need for from a small car to a sedan to a luxury car, the industry will adapt to it. And I think all of us remember what a big deal it was when Maruti 800 was launched, and everybody sort of got into that. And something which is the second part, the second side of the coin, or the other side of the coin, is when Maruti 1000 was launched. So when Maruti 1000 was launched, it was known as Aapki Sapno Ki Gaadi, and the advertisement campaign was around that. So there was a lot of the activity and action which happened around the fact that there was a new sedan which has sort of come into the market, Maruti 1000. So I want to tell you a small little incident. Many years ago, I used to work in Indonesia. Can everyone just mute it? There is some noise which is coming from the background. Okay. Zari, if you can mute everyone, please. Um, so what was happening is, this is a time where I was in Indonesia. I used to work there, and there was a very popular joke in that country. Is that when a person has more money, the first thing he does is he buys a new car or he upgrades his car, and then when he's got more money, he upgrades his house, and then when he's got even more money, he gets a new wife. So you see, so that was a popular joke.
I didn't want to touch the third angle, Kartik.
So that was very, very apt in terms of when you spoke about aspiration. So yes, it is true, right, that everybody in their minds is desiring a journey right from Maruti to Mercedes. And actually, why even Maruti to Mercedes? Let's say from a cycle to a Mercedes, and that is what human beings are all about. I mean, despite the angle of spirituality and materialism going on a different road there. But having said that, well, now let's sort of break down this auto sector for us. And you already sort of touched upon it. So, friends, in this whole auto industry, you have two-wheelers, which, as Sachin said, that the penetration level is really just about 13% in a country as large as ours. So even if you didn't have the roads, two-wheelers, I mean, is something that people still want to buy. Then 3% for passenger vehicles, which means four-wheelers, we are a grossly underserved market, and which obviously means that there's a lot of potential to buy. Per capita GDP, very simply put, iska matlab ye hota hai that today if you are earning 20,000 rupees a month, then your average monthly earning is 20,000. If 20 people in your building are also earning, let's say 20,000, 30,000, 35,000, 15,000, so sabko add kar do and then divided by the 20 people who are living in your building, then that becomes the average per capita income of your building. Matlab average income aap kitna kama rahe ho. That's basically what it means. So then from the building you move on to the society, and from the society you move on to the city, and then move on to the country. And that's basically what this is. So what has come out and what Sachin has said is that year after year, our per capita GDP is going. So GDP is gross domestic product, which is nothing but the entire sum total of what our country as a whole produces, goods and services both put together. So that's the denominator. And the numerator is the income that the country is earning. Sorry, the other way around, my mistake. So the income divided by the number of people, and that becomes the per capita GDP of the country. That's basically what it means. And when that number keeps rising, aspiration level moves up, and obviously new cars, new upgrades, new homes, and things like that. So now, Sachin, if I may ask you to, let's dive a little bit deeper into this two-wheeler, four-wheeler. We've already understood that the penetration levels are very, very low, and there is a huge opportunity in India. We also know that our Indian companies are probably manufacturing world-class products, and they are exporting. Maruti is exporting, and so is Eicher Motors, and so is everybody is in the export market. Bajaj is a huge exporter of bikes around the world, and their bikes are very popular in the Latin American space. And so the Bullet is also sort of as popular and as much as the the Bajaj products that are there going around the world. So this market is obviously evolved to a certain extent. Is there a lot of space for it to evolve, and how is it also evolving globally? If you can do a little deep dive into the two-wheeler and the four-wheeler segment, please.
Yeah, so as far as two-wheeler is concerned, so after China, India is the second largest market for two-wheeler. And simply to put, this market is big enough because also our per capita income is not so big when compared to a lot of other countries. But at the same time, multiple people have to go to work, and they need some level of solution for them to actually for some level of solution. So cycle is obviously is a solution, but much better solution is a faster mobility, and which is where two-wheeler is a preferred vehicle. And this is also clearly reflected when we look at the brand which people want to buy. This is the category which can't afford to take too much risk, and which is where they keep buying the same brand again and again. whereas as your income grows, you're willing to try something different. So that's clearly one market which has been, it's a market which is, let's say, if I were to exclude FY20, which has been the worst. So we can, during our discussion, we will talk about why FY20 was exceptionally poor year for the entire market. But more importantly, this is an industry which is growing at close to, let's say, if I were to talk about 10-year time frame, it's a 10% plus volume growth industry, right?
Wow,
Uh,
fabulous.
uh, yeah. So on top of that, you need to add the average selling price, because when we spoke about people need to increase or upgrade the vehicle, and there are continuous change in the technology, safety norms, all of this put together, there is always, so on top of the volume, there is always the extra selling price which the companies get, right? And that's actually how you convert volume plus selling price, is how you get into the revenue piece. So this is an industry has been a double digit growth industry. In India, hardly you will find many industries till date growing at that particular pace. And so there is a lot more growth potential as far as the industry is concerned. Now within this industry, clearly some of the trends which are emerging is that cities are largely over a period of last 15 years, the scooter market has become a big market. So scooter market is close to 32% of the overall population. Uh, right. So scooter has become a very important market, but obviously scooter remains because it's a unisex. So in a house, a papa or a mama or a husband or a wife or a kid, anyone, obviously adult kid, anyone can use it. So which is where the preferred choice is a scooter. And scooter has been growing, and it's now 32% of the overall population, or over the proportion of the how many incremental we sell. So this is one trend. The other trend within this industry, clearly we have observed, is that there is a increased share of higher cc motorcycles. So obviously, when I say this, the richer people. So once you are done with owning a particular Pulsar or a Avenger or something, you want to upgrade yourself to the next level.
True.
And even in my age, people, somebody in the age of 30 to 40 who has seen Royal Enfield in past. So there again, there's this ambition part, and once people start becoming that biking a culture which picks up, people want to get into that exclusive club, and which is where this higher CC is again one segment which used to be negligible 10 years back now, but that segment itself is now close to 5 to 6% of the overall demand. So that's one piece. So even within this 11% CAGR, the scooter and the higher CC bikes are much faster growing piece compared to the rest of the piece. So that's how I will put it. One of the important factor which is true for the passenger vehicles also in the overall market is how the financiers have played their role. So if you reconnect back maybe 20-year back or 15-year back, financiers were not very facilitators. They were always expensive. There were no new proper norms. They were hesitant to do it. That's also has picked up very well. So if I were to give you some numbers, so let's say in two-wheeler industry itself, the financing, so every 100 vehicle bought, almost 55% of the vehicle is financed today, versus used to be a negligible or very small number maybe 10-15 years back. So they are playing very important role. This number for the passenger vehicle used to be very small. That's again gone to 80-85%. So they are playing very important role, right? So my sense is that all of these, plus as like you gave a right explanation for how the GDP is calculated, but further to simplify, as so the incomes for the people have been growing, but at the same time, let's say rate of interest have come down, the vehicle
Yes.
prices have not increased so much. So ability to buy has also gone up, which is where the penetration kept increasing and the growth has taken place. So if we were to exclude, let's say, last 2.5 year plus this year, this story was wonderfully playing out. I'm sure this will again play out, but let's say post demon, post GST, post ILFS, post COVID, all of these exceptions have created some sort of, I will say, opportunity for the investors, because that's where the demand has gone down. But
Yes.
again, the long-term trend should remain. Right. So this is in very short about the two-wheeler industry.
Right, and I think that's actually quite accurate, and it sums it up also. So the fact that here we have an opportunity, which is like an almost win-win opportunity. I mean, not all industries you find this thing happening. So here on the buyer side, which is from our point of view as a retail, consumer, there is demand, there is aspiration level that we want to buy, we want to upgrade. This is getting supported by the fact that interest rates are lower, and like Sachin rightly said, more than 50% of vehicles sold today are being sold on finance, and financiers are actually supporting it and facilitating this thing. In fact, advertisements have changed. The advertisement now starts with, get the XYZ product at an EMI of 999 per year, per lakh per year, and that kind of things. So the whole dynamics have actually played out so beautifully. It's like a perfect setup. So whoever wanted to get into this industry, even as a manufacturer, as a participant, as an OEM manufacturer, or even as a consumer and simply as an investor also, I think it's like a all round win-win situation, as we can see. Let's talk about commercial and industrial transportation, the tractor industry. Tractor industry is obviously, in our country, the demand is driven by good monsoons and by good harvest and crops and things like that. But at the same time, we've seen climate has been playing havoc. We've had locust infestation, which has happened in this year in such a dramatic manner that it's kind of eaten away a lot of crops. There was, of course, a lot of destruction. So on one side, there is a climatic factor which is playing a role in the growth of the commercial and the industrial transportation sector. And at the same time, India is a huge country. We still, we are told by the government that we still need to feed so many people, and we have stock for the next 1 year and 2 years. They keep publishing these reports and records. But having said that, from your analysis, have you actually seen that there is a similar kind of opportunity also in the commercial and the industrial space? The trucks, and of course, we sort of exclude this year and this 6-month period from April to September, where everything was in a little bit of a limbo. But having said that, tractor market and the truck market. You're on mute, Sachin.
Yeah, sorry. Let me start with the tractor first. So let's say when you look at both the tractor as well as you rightly put, it's more dependent on monsoon. This is how the data suggests. So that's quite an accurate observation that you have. So both the tractor and the CV industry are quite cyclical because there is an underlying economics attached to it. So it's not that just the mobility, but there is an underlying economics also attached to it. So tractor, our observation for last 20-25 year industry, and even as recent as last 5 years, our observation is it's a underlying 6 to 7% CAGR industry. Now this is keeping in mind how much. So if you recollect, India is quite a scatteredly hold land banks, right? So on an average, people hold, let's say, a 3-acre kind of land bank. So if you increase that to 6.5, then your ability to buy more tractor goes up. But somewhere maybe we have done this exercise a year and a half back, and which is what was suggesting that even considering the 3-acre and considering the level of income, we are yet to do a right level of penetration which is required, and there is still a lot more room to grow. And again, our calculations suggest that as promised and as been seen even especially this year, as your income grows in this particular bucket, the level of penetration can further go up, and which is where you can see sustained 6 to 7% volume growth as far as tractor is concerned. And again, this is our observation that although, so let's say FY20 was a degrowth, and before that 3 year was a consistent growth, this year again, despite all the rest of the subsegments are going to see a degrowth, this industry, the way we have seen, the way it is panning out, looks like this could be just the tractor piece could be a growth industry this year. So it's a steady state industry, especially this we can comfortably also say, because the water reservoir level from the basically the reservoir levels are quite comfortable at the India level, and which is where there's some sort of comfort could come. Now coming to the CV industry, so CV has been a quite cyclical industry. Again, it's a 7-8% volume growth industry. Again, this is a 20-25 year observation and as recent, but the cycles here in the CV industry are quite sharp. So our observation for last 4 or 5 cycles, basically over a period of last 25 years, clearly suggests that this industry grows in a phase of 3-4 years and then suddenly it collapses. So let's say last year you sold 100, over a period of next 2 year you will decline by 25% and you will become 50, and then again you start to grow back, and maybe at year 3 or year 4 you reach to the level of, let's say, 120, 130 volume. So this is an underlying, so when I'm saying underlying growth, there is a volume growth which keeps happening, but then you see the cycle 100 becoming 50, 50 becoming 120. That is the kind of cycle. So it's more cyclical in nature, and which is where you will see that these companies profitability also react in that way. So you just assume कि आपने business बनाया है 100 volume के लिए, उस हिसाब से आप employees को पैसा भी दे रहे हो, salary दे रहे हो, सारे fixed खर्चे हैं, but suddenly आपकी volume कम हो गई तो आपके losses भी आने शुरू हो जाते हैं. Similarly, when you go back to 120, the salary cost, the fixed cost remain the same, but the profit really jumps up, right? So this is the nature of the industry. It's more cyclical, but underlying growth is there. But again, if you see India roaring back, this is an observation for the last couple of years. Despite India not performing, if I were to take that liberty and say that we have not done to the optimal level we should have grown, GDP growth should have been much better. I'm quite confident about this subject that as we pick up on this, the entire GDP growth, this industry could really, really do much better than what it is. Just to give you some fact, last year only, we have seen that FY20 from the peak of FY19, this industry has already declined by close to 47%. On top of that, whatever number you see, so there is a complete collapse in the volume in the industry, which is likely to go up in coming years. So I'm just saying that there is this short-term thing which will really start to kick up, but on top of that, you should also see a sustained longer-term growth in this industry.
Yes, absolutely. Fabulous. So what's very clear, everyone, is that एक तो है कि जो ट्रैक्टर है या कमर्शियल व्हीकल है, इट इज फॉलोइंग अ सर्टेन पैटर्न ऑफ बाइंग. सो एक बार वो थोड़ा सा पुराना हो जाता है, दे डोंट रन इट फॉर लाइक 10 years the way we run cars for 10 years, like our personal vehicles. But having said that, one thing which is happening is that this demand comes back every 2-3 years for the commercial vehicles. And for tractors, of course, it is dependent on a season that plays out. So we have better season, better crop output. Naturally, that goes up. The other very interesting thing for all of you is, see, the government is also doing a lot of work in this space. So indirectly, they're not really saying that, okay, go and buy more tractors. But what they're saying is that we want to increase the farmer's income. Every single budget without fail talks about this, that we want to increase the income of farmers. The MSP, the minimum support price for the goods that are being produced by the farmer, is getting a re-rating each time. The government buys it at a certain rate, so the farmer benefits, his income goes up. Not only that, there is also private sector participation as well as government emphasis on direct to farmer. So we can see, farmers are coming, right in front of us is happening. Farmers are coming in a locality and they're selling their produces. And in that sense, even larger companies, I mean, ITC for a fact, I know, is actually putting a lot of effort and resources to procure directly from the farmer, elimination of middlemen. So there's better value for the consumer, and of course, there's better income for the farmer. So अगर farmer का income ऊपर जाएगा, तो naturally his consumption of his need to develop and cultivate will go up, and at the same time, the demand for commercial and industrial transportation also sort of moves up. I want to come to another very, very important area, which is in my mind, a game changer. And a lot of people who know Transcend, a lot of people who know what we do, we are another vertical of our work is also in the energy and the petroleum industry. So we work very closely with them. We do market research for them. So some of you already know that we are very active in the oil and energy industry. So having said that, plus we also consult in the areas of climate resilience, smart cities, and disaster DRR, disaster risk reduction activities and things like that for geographies, for societies, and for industries. So now in that space, what's happening, friends, what's happening is something radically different. There are, that story which I told you about the New York Times Square, that is actually a much bigger reality in our faces, more than a page from a storybook or a fiction that it happened 100 years ago. So something like that is going to repeat again. No, it's not going to just come like that. It is a fact. It's there in front of us. What is happening is, few days back, let's take this lockdown period. From, if you're living in a high rise, if you're living at about a 18th floor, 20th floor, 30th floor, you could actually see a very, very distant kind of a view. You were getting it. You could see hills and mountains, and people were taking pictures and saying, look at the fact that there's no pollution, there's no carbon, and nobody's traveling, nobody's got to go anywhere. You're all in your houses, and you are actually getting to breathe the fabulous air. The air quality index had sort of come down, which is good, basically, because otherwise the typical air quality index in different indices, some put it at 100, some put it at 300. Delhi, Gurgaon, India, Mumbai, Bangalore, these are like highly polluted cities. So we've actually seen that happening. What happens when carbon emissions go down? What happens when pollution goes down? So the fact is, I think there's a game changer opportunity coming up in this space, because there are a lot of Indian manufacturers who manufacture batteries. There are a lot of them who manufacture components. Now, it is said that Tesla actually went ahead and said that there is some 100,000 moving parts in a regular car, versus there's some only about 30 moving parts in a electric vehicle, which obviously also puts down carbon emissions. Basically, it's a very smooth ride. I've driven a EV. It's so silent. It's super silent. And now look at the technology that Morrison garage cars are coming up. They are voice controlled, and you don't even feel that you're missing out anything. So my question, Sachin, and something that an opportunity that is emerging for investors, I'm sure, like you mentioned, that the industry is extremely adaptive. But from whatever you are seeing, is there, like, at the back of it, personally, we think, because we are connected so much with the oil industry, we think that India is a place where only when you're pushed to the wall will you react. You will not be what shall we say, proactive in doing things. So one fine day there will be a policy which will say that, okay, no cars less than 5 years, except which are 5 years old, can operate, or maybe all these cars have to be scrapped out because the carbon is too much, we can't breathe this air. So I think something dramatic and radical will happen over the next few years, maybe in the next decade or so. But there is a very strong case that by 2030, we pretty much might see the end of fossil fuel driven cars, petrol and diesel cars. So do you see that in your research? And do you think that all these companies that you're not talking to, and the investments that we are making in the auto sector, are they actually gearing up for this huge demand? Because although the penetration is small, but the numbers are humongous. So if all of us have to, suddenly change our one car or two cars to an EV, now let's assume that there's a lot of work happening on the fuel outlets also, where they're going to be charging points. That's happening in a huge way all across. But having said that, is the industry geared up for that, and could that also translate into a game-changing opportunity in the next 10 years?
So Kartik, one very clear thing is that obviously EV is going to be a reality. There is absolutely no doubt. But whether it is just the battery-led changeover, or it's a hydrofuel cell changeover, it's only because the entire technology is actually evolving here. Now, the other important fundamental point you raised, whether we will see by 2030 complete changeover. Basically, I'll just bring the angle here is that we are a democracy, unlike China. So we will not see government coming and saying no. One fine day we'll just change over. Actually, if you recollect and go back, couple of areas, as a city like Delhi, there are already some level of mandates which have started to kick in. Yes. But the reality is this mandate has to be supported by some level of infrastructure from the government side, which will slowly kick in. But when we look at even if you observe how the global consumers are reacting, right? It's actually, if you see heart of it, whether it's the China, which is really growing, which is one of the hot market for the EV, or European markets, you will observe that it's not the consumer who is looking for the solution. It is the governments who are driving it. Or even in India context, whether it is CNG or push towards EV, it is some of the courts who are driving it directly, indirectly. It's driven by a regulator rather than the consumers. Consumers still wants heart of heart a cheaper solution. I'm talking about the masses,
Of
not the
course, yes.
exclusive, Model X of the world, right? So that's a separate market, because uh, the way it is priced today, the battery prices are so expensive that for the masses to travel, it could be difficult. So the real solution, my sense is that if we are talking about the real sense of opportunity in EV, it is working very well when you put the commercial angle to it. Unless a vehicle is traveling, let's say, 180 or 200 kilometers a day, it's not a viable solution as of now from the mass scale perspective. So my judgment here is, especially for the country like India, it could work really well for, let's say, the buses, because buses work just one route, right?
Right,
And
right.
ideally they would be covering so much space. Or let's say the three wheeler piece, which is again used for the commercial purpose. So those are the ones who will quickly adapt to it, maybe followed by the two wheeler. Again, we need to see. So there are a couple of launches, but the bigger challenge here in the country like India is, once you cross certain, it again connects back to the thing that how much income you have, right? Once you cross a threshold of 1 lakh, 1,20,000 is when the consumers actually retract back. You don't have that much buying power. So unless the battery prices collapse, you will not see this market expanding. And which is where I refer to, that the technology is continuously evolving, which will keep pushing the battery prices down, and which is what will make the battery as the reality going forward. But if you look at some of the global projections, they're clearly suggesting that, let's say, by even with the government push, even with the battery prices coming down, it's only, let's say, on an incremental basis, not even on the complete mass basis. Incremental basis, you are saying that maybe 30-35% of the new vehicles will get sold on EV or hybrid electric model by 2040. So it will be, and mind you, this is a big challenge for everyone, because the entire supply chain has to ramp up, and which is where it's still a very progressive, and if somebody is playing for it, it's a really big opportunity. It will, but even when I say on a global scale, let's say 30% by 2040, it's still a big challenge for the entire industry. Whether the companies are ready for it or not, that's the other question which you put.
Right.
Obviously, you have the first mover advantage with a player like Tesla, but if you see, they are playing in the premium market, and what's really working for them is this inherent technology where they are able to give best efficiency, right? So apart from all the features, because that's what manufacturers can give. So like you referred, that in existing IC engine, which is the combustion engine model, there are many moving parts, and ultimately you get is an assembly. But once you
Correct.
move to the motor based, which is the battery based model, what an manufacturer can offer is only the BMS system, which is how best efficiently you can use your battery and convert the power back into the speed to the wheels, or the other associated features which you give in the car. That's where the manufacturer will start making more and more money. So from that perspective, if you see, it's the Tesla which has done well. But the rest of the value chain, if you see, whether it's the distributors, how many dealer distributors you have, the ability to service, all of this is still a piece associated with the existing OEMs. And you will see, not just so India will be far behind because there's no real demand for it. But in European, angle, you will see multiple new whole host of launches in next 2 to 3 years. You will certainly see, because that's how the companies are gearing up for that.
And
So
I think, yeah.
existing guys are actually gearing up, and they will. It's not just gearing up, but they are actually about to launch their models.
Yeah, so you hit the nail on the head that there is always, whenever there's a new product or a new concept or a new technology that comes in, it follows a typical product cycle kind of a curve. And what happens is at the beginning there's only a few people who are interested in that, maybe very health conscious and or maybe very environment conscious. So they try. The health conscious people try new types of nutritions. The environment conscious will try and get into these kind of vehicles. So it will start in a slow sort of manner, and if any precedences are there to go by, I remember the first computer that I bought was a desktop computer. And way back in 1995, we paid some 70,000 rupees for it. And today, in 70,000, imagine the kind of technology. The technology has leapfrogged by like 1,000 times or even more. The same thing applies for a color television. When it was introduced in the late 70s and the early 80s, I remember a color TV used to be for about 15, 20,000. And today, you're getting a technology which is like the smart TV, and you have the works, and you have whatever you can possibly imagine in the television at the same price, even after so many years, with inflation and with everything else. So I think there is a, it's
Karthik, just to add to this, is 15 years back, it would be hard for us to imagine the conversation that we are having with the phone.
Yeah. Absolutely, you're so right. Sachin, we're very quickly, we've got about 10 minutes or so. We'll just move to let's move to logistics. Today I think every household, including in our households, our kids. My kids are like 10-year-olds and 8-year-olds and 12-year-olds. They also know how to go to Amazon, and they want to have a mobile cover, or they want to have a little toy, or whatever they want to have. They can actually speak to the phone and start doing their ordering. And which is where I come. I think logistics, that's the other component of this investment strategy that you sort of manage. Although that is about say 11 odd percent, 11%, maybe you can give me the exact figure, approximately 11% of your strategy is today towards the logistics, and the other almost 90% or so is towards auto sector. But we don't think twice today. That's a way of life. And there is talk of drones delivering pizzas very shortly. Domino's is going to do that, and there are all sorts of technologies coming in right in the transportation sector. So once upon a time, sorry, in the logistics sector. So once upon a time, we only used to think of logistics like these huge trailers with like 100 tires and moving equipment from ports to another manufacturing utility and things like that. But today that logistics has come right into our house, and each one of us is a consumer in one way or the other. So is there equal amount of opportunity in the logistics space, and do you actually see the logistics space also getting transformed in a way that we haven't probably imagined in the last maybe 20 years, and the next 10 years logistics could be into a completely different zone?
Sure, Karthik. So, see, from logistics perspective, even today, so obviously, is as the economic activity goes up, you will see that the entire logistics piece growing leaps and bounds. But especially the opportunity I'm more excited about is the way it will actually shape up. So even today, if you look at, so the crude way, if you look at the logistics, it's nothing but a truck, or let's say we're talking about the larger piece, a vehicle taking one article and delivering it to somebody else. Today, this vehicle who takes up the article and deliver, large part of it is done by, let's say, it's a trucking activity, and almost 90% of this trucking is owned by individuals. And there is an element of unorganized into it. There is an element that people are trying to actually save on some of the taxes, and which is where this industry is actually flourishing with one or two single owner. But post GST, so even if you recollect today, even there is this the word you and your investors, especially your investors, might be keep hearing, or in fact some of them may be involved, is the e-way bill, right?
Right.
So it has not been properly implemented by the government. Obviously, they also don't want to disturb the trade. But once this e-way bill start to happen on the government portal, is when you will see good chunk of this activity actually shifting to the organized players who are, so eventually they will use the services of these small guys, but they will be the one who will be providing this complete solution.
Uh,
With the with the player is that let's say a big FMCG company, they still want to get involved with the logistics piece because somewhere they're unsecure, because there are chota truckers, so they don't want to deal with so many guys, right? They want to deal with one single guy who can provide an affordable solution. So once you see these guys growing and trying, then let's say Sachin Trivedi becomes a reasonably big size, or the Kartik becomes a reasonably big size operator. He walks into the HUL and tell the HUL or the other FMCG company that, hey, I can provide you a reliable service. Is when HUL will want to actually take away that service from his own internal staff and give it to Kartik.
Right, right.
That's the activity we are more excited when. You must have heard this word 3PL, the jargon 3PL, right? If in a simplified way, it is just this. This is the piece I see growing in multifold, because in India, it's a minuscule activity. It has just been used efficiently by the auto industry. But rest of the industry is actually not secured about they're not, it's not just about money, it's about reliability.
Right.
And that's the piece which will, once the formalization picks up, the guys become big. That's where you will see that this actually taking a much faster shape. And that's one piece. And the second piece is, let's say, obviously with this entire big infrastructure which the government is creating along with the efficient road, is this dedicated freight corridor, which is a dedicated line for transportation or for the wagons or the freight. Once that start to kick in, you will see a dedicated infrastructure. So today, let's say some consignment move from Delhi to, let's say, Bombay. Nobody can give certainty on the Indian railway that it will reach in next 24 hours or next 25 hours, or let's say next 30 hours, because the first priority is train. So if a good train versus a passenger train, the passenger train will go first and the good train has to wait. That's where there is no priorities are given, and there is a mispricing happening. So once that dedicated line comes, you will see much more better efficient way the logistics is done, and that's how you will see that the opportunity, it will shape up the way I am describing.
Very
That's
well,
a
very well.
multi-year opportunity.
Yeah, that's right, absolutely. Because we are at such a nascent stage, as it appears, that there is so much that the government is also doing. The e-way bill will play a a significant role in changing the life of the transportation, the logistics players here. Now, all said and done, viewers, whenever you have a question, do put it in. I don't think we have too much time to take questions in, but do post it on the comment section of the YouTube. Do subscribe to our channel also if you like these shows and the productions that we're doing for you, so that you're well informed in advance about all the other future activities. And I would want to wrap up this show, Sachin, with a very important angle to any investment. So whenever we talk of an investment, there is a certain potential inherent I don't like to use the word risk, but factors that could sort of play against you, or things that could not really work our way. So in that sense, that discussion is not complete without the talk of what could possibly go wrong, or what could be the possible roadblocks, what are the hindrances for the kind of growth that we've spoken about, for two wheelers, for OEMs, for CVs, maybe for passenger vehicles, maybe for electric vehicles, that you very well explained that there's a long way to go. Plus, democracy being what it is, it has its own perils also. And also for the logistics, I think there is a lot of reform happening in that space. But generally speaking, see, investors, please understand that this is a sector that we are investing into. So it's a concentrated bet. So this is not like a diversified portfolio that we're talking about. You're taking bets only on automobile manufacturers, equipment manufacturers, ancillary spare part manufacturers, and things like that. So there is an inherent risk, sometimes cyclical, sometimes driven by demand, but we also know there is aspiration playing in, so it will keep going on all along. But Sajin, if you could sum up for us in terms of what are the risks as an investment manager, what are the risks that people should sort of take into account, take into their cognizance?
So, Karthik, it goes back to the initial point that we started is the wealth generation, basically associated with the income generation, right? So, if I see my house prices collapsing, the income collapsing, my ability to enjoy or want to, the ambition, aspiration takes a back seat, right? If
Right, right.
finances actually pull back, it takes a backseat, because even if I have an income, certain level of income projection, finances says no, I'm not funding it. It takes a backseat. And the third factor, which is the EV related derating, which has already happened in the sector. So if you actually take back your observation in last 2 to 3 years, most of these risks have actually played out. Right now, you just need to go back. So if I were to take you back, the last 3 year, especially post demon era, right? You've not seen a level of nominal GDP growth. What we are all used to is 7 8 10%, 7 to 8% inflation, 7 to 8% growth, and this is how 13 14% growth that we all used to enjoy as a country. And when we
Correct.
talk about country income, somehow it percolates down to us. That's because of the lower inflation. Also, everything has actually come down for us, right? That's one factor which has already played out or is also playing in. So if your income generation is low, wealth effect will be low, and that's how somewhere the thing will start to kick in. The second the second impact which is there is that in the lower income generation, what we have seen in last 2.5 years, the whole host of thing has happened. You have shifted from BS3 to BS4, BS4 to BS6. It's a leap bound technology that we have already done it. On top of that, if you now realize versus 4 year back for car versus now, every car will have minimum 2 airbag. This is just an example of the feature from the safety angle the governments have already enforced, right?
Right.
On a two-wheeler, there is a ABS braking or CBS braking. There are many features which are there, which have come in either the car or the way. So the basic point here is that in last 2.5 years, the cost of vehicle has gone up significantly, but at the same time individual income has not gone up. And the third factor, especially if I were to use the word after the ILFS episode, entire NBFC has gone back burner. NBFC is one of the important. So the most important function which NBFC does is what banks cannot do. Banks have their norms, so they cannot actually go and lend to any of the section of the society. NBFCs are good in doing that asset funding, right? So
Correct.
post that episode, we have seen that the NBFCs have really pulled back. So one, incomes have not grown. Second, cost of the vehicle has gone up. Third, the financiers have pulled back, and there is a whole host of technology changes which have also happened. So all of this has played out, which is where you've seen that the volumes have degrown by 20%. On top of that, the COVID has hit us. And I'm sure with things normalizing from here on, I think we should be back on the track and we should catch up uh, the longer term trend, and which is where I am more excited about.
Great, great, wonderful. So friends, just to summarize, what it means in one sentence is that this the opportunity here, this transportation logistics opportunity, is directly related to prosperity. Your prosperity, the corporate prosperity, the country's prosperity. And when times are gloomy and dull, like the weather is today, for example, what happens is we tend to forget the larger picture. So a year or two back, I remember, there was so much of talk of India becoming a $5 trillion economy by 2030. The fact that we are number 6 or number 7, and I think that ranks may change a little bit because of what has happened in 2020. But having said that, I don't think you see the 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 entire opportunity with the Indian consumer, the aspiration level, the income levels, which have taken a little bit of a backseat now. But like Sachin says, this will come back to normalcy, and we all know that, right? As things they may change the style of business, the method of doing business. A lot of things have dramatically changed in the last 6 months, and I think they will continue that way for a long time. But having said that, I think it's only natural for a human to go back on the path of progress and prosperity. And then once the progress and prosperity is back on track, and which it will be, because even 100 years ago, we saw that the history tells us Spanish flu came and went, the Great Depression came and went. So everything happened, people endured, and the ones who survived are, of course, they're the ones who emerged as winners. So all of that, I think, will play out. And with that, it's 6 p.m. and we will take a wrap on this show. Sachin, I would like to thank you. Thank you so much for coming and talking to us today. It was an absolute pleasure. And I think a lot of people who will listen to this will identify, I think, a multitude of opportunities for themselves, whether they are investors or manufacturers or stakeholders. or whatever role they want to even play, come forward and play in this huge landscape of transportation and logistics. So team from UTI, thank you very much for supporting us. And my Transcend team, last but not the least, thank you very much for being around and making each one of these events happen. And we have a successful show at our end. So thank you all very much. Good evening, and have a lovely evening. We will catch up with everybody again, once again, in the next episode of the Multimillionaire Forum, which will happen within 2 weeks again. So thank
Thank
you.
you, Kartik. Thank you to your team, and thank you to all the viewers on the being on the show. Thank you very much.
Pleasure,
Thank you.
pleasure. Thank you so much, Sachin.
My pleasure.
Thanks. Bye
Bye
bye.
bye.